Welcome. Today, we're diving into the hidden world of algorithmic bias. It's a place where invisible lines of code are making huge, life-changing calls about every single one of us, every single day.
Sounds a little like sci-fi, right? Well, for millions of people, this isn't some far-off what-if. It's their reality, right now all shaped by AI. These secret scores are real, and believe me, they are changing everything.
All right, let's get right into it. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with the basics. What even is algorithmic bias? So let's get one thing straight. This isn't about some evil AI from the movies. Nah, the bias usually creeps in from the data we give it. Think about it. If the data is already messed up with historical baggage, the AI is going to learn those same biases. Or it could be just a simple design flaw. At the end of the day, these algorithms are basically just mirrors, reflecting our own prejudices back at us, and sometimes they even make them bigger. Okay, so this is where it gets super tricky. We want to tell the algorithm, hey, be fair. But what does fair actually mean? It's a huge philosophical question with no easy answer. And if we can't agree on it, how is a machine supposed to figure it out? This puts developers in a really tough spot.
This slide just nails the problem. You've got these two big ideas of fairness, and guess what? You often can't have both. So think about that loan application. If you go for statistical parity, you're basically saying, hey, let's make sure every group gets the same percentage of loans. But that might mean giving loans to people who aren't really qualified just to hit the numbers. On the other hand, if you go for equal opportunity, you might just reinforce old problems where some groups have always had a harder time getting approved. It's a total catch-22. Making things fair in one way can make them less fair in another.
And look, this isn't just some academic thought experiment. This stuff has real-world consequences. Let's look at a case study from the criminal justice system where this exact problem had, well, devastating effects.
So there's this algorithm called Compass. It's used all over the US, and it crunches 137 different data points about a defendant to predict if they're likely to reoffend. And that prediction, that risk score, can literally influence how much bail they have to pay or even how long they go to prison.
But here's the thing. An investigation by ProPublica dug into the data and found something pretty shocking. They discovered that Black defendants who were actually not going to reoffend were almost twice as likely to get flagged as high risk anyway. Think about that. That's a huge error rate with very real, very human consequences. And here's the kicker. The system wasn't just biased, it wasn't even that good at its job. A 2018 study had regular people, like random people from the internet, try to predict the same thing. And you're not going to believe this. They were just as accurate, maybe even a little bit better, than the fancy, expensive algorithm. No joke.
It gets even crazier. Researchers figured out that you could throw out almost all of those 137 data points. With just two things, age and number of prior convictions, you could build a super simple model that was just as accurate. I mean, just let that sink in. A simple, easy-to-understand model does the same job as this complex black box system that costs a ton of money. It makes you wonder what's going on with this whole industry, right?
So all of this brings us to this really tough central paradox in AI ethics. What happens when you try to fix the bias, but you end up making things worse in a completely different way? That's what we call the fairness trade-off.
Okay, check this out. A recent study on large language models gave us a pretty disturbing example. You had one version of a model that, correctly, wouldn't generate violent content against women. Good. But then a newer version, probably in an effort to be unbiased, didn't get less violent. Oh no, it actually became more willing to generate violent content against women, basically to match how willing it already was to do it for men. So instead of reducing harm, it just spread it around.
And this just leaves you with this really awful question. Is it progress if you're just evening the score on who gets harmed? I mean, come on. This proves that fixing bias isn't just about tweaking numbers. It's a deep ethical minefield.
And don't think this is just some weird quirk with language models. This same problem, this fairness trade-off, shows up everywhere. In healthcare, finance, you name it. We're constantly forced to choose between things that all seem important, like being accurate versus being fair, or making a profit versus doing the right thing. So yeah, it's a mess, but what do we do about it? How can we possibly navigate this minefield and start building AI that we can actually feel good about, that we can trust? Well, one big part of the answer is regulation.
The EU's AI Act is a huge deal. It's the first major law of its kind. It takes a pretty smart, risk-based approach. So, really dangerous stuff, like government social scoring, banned, gone. And for high-stakes AI, like in hiring or policing, there are now super strict rules about transparency and safety.
Then there's the tech side of things. Developers have a huge role to play here. They need to be auditing their data for bias before they even start training. They need to test their models against a whole bunch of different fairness metrics, not just one. And this is so important. They have to talk to different kinds of people to actually understand how their tech is going to affect them in the real world.
At the end of the day, all of these rules and technical fixes need to be built on a solid foundation of ethics. We're talking about an ethical compass, right? We need AI that's fair, obviously, but we also need transparency. We need to be able to see how it's making decisions. And we need accountability. So when something goes wrong, we know who's responsible.
When you really get down to it, AI is just a mirror. The biases we're finding in these systems, they're just reflecting the biases that are already out there in the world, in our society. So the real challenge here isn't just about fixing the code. It's about looking in that mirror and asking ourselves a really tough question. Are we actually ready to fix what we see?